Scraptrap, a good but ultimately flawed design. How's it going, everybody? And welcome to a new video series I'm going to be doing on the channel called FNAF Discussions. Now, we'll get into more about that later, but as you could probably tell by our little intro there and the thumbnail and title, our first video of this series is going to be about Scraptrap and how he has a good design, but it missed the mark in a few different places. So this video is going to be broken down into about 4 or 5 different parts, just going over a comparison between him and Scraptrap, going over the good things that Scraptrap has, the bad things that Scraptrap has, and then we'll be showing a quick design fix, I guess, that I did just to sort of compare the original design to what I think are small improvements that could make the design better. So first, we're going to go over the comparison. So, Springtrap and Scraptrap. Now, very obviously, extremely different to the point that they are essentially completely different characters, which sort of leads into the idea that Scraptrap is he has to be a different suit from a different location that Springtrap somehow switched out, but that's really the only logical explanation because they're just so different. Not that that's bad, but it's weird that we have to kind of figure out why they're so different. So right off the bat, the most immediate thing that is different is that Springtrap is quite bulky compared to how sort of skinny and lanky Scraptrap is. It's a very jarring difference, but I don't think it's necessarily bad because I like this because he seems way more like, I don't even know, sickly almost compared to Springtrap. Like Springtrap looks pretty beat up, but Scraptrap kind of just looks sickly and gross, and I think that's a pretty cool and interesting design difference between the two, which makes me I almost kind of like this one better in that regard. I think Springtrap's still an ultimately better design, but I do kind of like the more like injured and sickly approach that Scraptrap has. Now, a big difference that is a bit of a negative towards Scraptrap is the head size. Springtrap is bulky, but overall his proportions are pretty balanced, and he doesn't really look out of place. Like nothing on him looks out of place or odd, which you get with Scraptrap in his extremely large head compared to his body. It just doesn't work. It's way too big and it's way too tall, and it just really sticks out compared to the rest of the body. Like, it just doesn't look like it matches. So that's a big negative comparison between the two, but again, it's sort of based on preference. But another big difference is, well, I guess differences, is how Springtrap looks a bit more beat up in some areas, like his feet compared to Scraptrap, but then Scraptrap looks more beat up in other areas, like he's missing an entire arm, his head is like super beat up. So it's just interesting to see where some things are more damaged, but then other things are more repaired. And it's just kind of an interesting look and interesting comparison. But I just wanted to go over a quick comparison to show where like Springtrap does better or where Scraptrap does better in overall designs. So let's just move right into the good things about the Scraptrap design. Now, right off the bat, to start with, a really good thing is the salvage sections in Pizza Sim. In these salvage sections, he looks amazing. Just that really, like, kind of bad lighting that's just top down really hides a lot of the flaws in his design, a lot of the bad parts, and just really highlights some of the good parts. Like, the sunken eyes look really cool. And just overall, like, you don't really see how big the head is compared to the body because of lighting. So I think the best look he has in game is here, just because it's like, oh, it's like really the only look he has aside from his jump scare. But here he looks really cool and like actually really kind of creepy. So this is probably the best part of him in the game. But to just go over the overall design and highlight some of the good aspects, like I kind of said in the comparison, I think the way like his sickly appearance, at least for his body, looks really good. I even like the bone arm. I think it's a bit small, but I think it's a kind of a very unique element to him that you don't see really with any other animatronic throughout the entire series. I mean, like, I guess kind of Foxy has his hook, but that doesn't really compare to William Afton having basically a knife built into his body. So I think that's a really cool element that Scott added to the design. But another cool element that I like with the design is the detached jaw. Now, a lot of people actually have that as like a big criticism of the design, and I can see why, because it doesn't seem like it's really attached to a whole lot, which I fixed in my design that we'll show later. But I always got the impression that this was sort of a like first model of Spring Bonnie, because like you see with the rock stars, and you see this with Withered Chica, they all kind of have like a detached lower jaw with like these poles or something that moves the jaws up and down. And that's sort of the impression I get with this, is that it was one of those kind of designs that had like the whole lower jaw moved in sort of with these pipes on the side. The design I think is associated with Henry, but I kind of got the impression that this is the design element that Scott was going for. But again, maybe not. It can be interpreted in different ways, but that's the understanding I got from it. Now, I think another good element is the coloring. I really like the way the coloring looks on Scraptrap. I think it's almost better than Springtrap, just because I like the darker outside compared to the lighter inside on Scraptrap. I should have brought that up in the Springtrap comparison, but that's just sort of something I like on here, is the coloring. I think a darker outside with an inner, like with the sort of chest and stomach area being lighter, does make the design look a bit better. And another element is the jaw itself. I don't think anything is going to look quite as cool as the Springtrap face, but I definitely like the muzzle and jaw section on Scraptrap. I like how it juts out a bit more, so it actually looks more like a muzzle. And the two buck teeth with all the sharp teeth on the bottom really kind of give it an actual animatronic look compared to the way that Spring Bonnie looks. But man, this is a lot of stuff I should have brought up in the comparison, but oh well. But overall, I think there's a lot of solid stuff here that makes the design good, but there's a few things that really bring the design down like a ton. So with that, we'll just jump into what I think are the bad elements of his design. Now, some of the things that I think are really bad with his design, one, just how short the bone arm is. It really makes the design look unbalanced, because if it was like longer, even if it was just like slightly longer, I think it would balance out the design better. But it just looks really weird. It, like, you're not really going to be able to do a whole lot with that. Now, probably the biggest thing that people always bring up is the way that his human design looks. While it's definitely something that I think brings the design down a ton, I'm not going to fault Scott on not being able to make a good looking human model, because I can't at all. I can't even draw people. The best kind of people I draw are stick figures. So I'm not going to get on him for not being able to model a good looking person, because I can't do that. So I have no right to judge. So any sort of like the body or human element of his design, I'm gonna kind of leave alone because I really don't have any place to say whether it's good or bad. The only thing I'll bring up is his ear. Not because there's an ear in his design, but because it just sort of weirdly sticks out in the design, which is something I address in the one I make. So that is just something I find weird, but other than that, I'm not going to fault the human part of him. But I think the three elements that really bring the design down are the ears, the head in general, and then the eyes. So the ears, I think, are too small and too far back. If they were forward and proportionally larger, I think that would really help sort of clear up the big forehead that everybody gets on him for, which admittedly is quite weird. But I just think if the ears were shifted, it would look a lot better. Now, the eyes are really bad. I think if he had sunken in eyes or like just no eyes in general, that design would look a lot better. So I'll throw up a picture of his jump scare versus one that I edited for a couple thumbnails, and just removing the eyes looks a ton better. Just because you don't get the weird, just solid, almost googly eyes looking things, you just get this really creepy sunken in eyes, and I think that's where the design kind of fails, is just these weird, big, bulky silver eyes. Now, with the overall head design, I think the design itself is fine, but it's way too big, and it just feels like it's sticking up way too much, which is something I also address. We'll get into that in a second here. But it's just proportionally way too big compared to the rest of his body. It just sticks out like a sore thumb, and I think that's probably the biggest part that brings the design down, is just how big the head is. So those are some of the more negative aspects of the design that I think really dropped the ball. So we'll be moving into my design and comparing the two to sort of see where I think some small improvements would have made the design extremely better. Alright, so to compare my updated design to the original design, you can already notice a few key differences that I brought up in my sort of negative part of the video. So the first thing is this kind of extended bone arm. It's not very well made because I just quickly edited this up in Photoshop, but essentially I would want the bone arm to be at least a little bit longer to sort of give it a little bit more of a balanced look. It's not perfect, and it's not exactly how I'd want it, but it's a lot better than what it originally was. Now, another big detail, obviously, the eyes. I removed the eyes, and so I think it really makes the design look a bit better. I just think it looks a lot creepier. Like, he looks a lot creepier here than he does with these goofy looking eyes. So that really brings the design all around better. You can notice with the ears too, I proportionally made them larger and moved them forward. So he still has a kind of big forehead, but it's a lot less bad than it was before. Like, this looks a lot better than this does, because the ears are proportionally bigger, which means that the head looks a little bit more balanced, and there's not like a huge forehead, it's a little bit smaller. And another big change was scaling the head down, and I shifted it down slightly. So you can see here how the head is like a bit more raised up and it's larger, but I moved it down slightly and I scaled it down. So it sort of blends into the design a lot better than it does with the original design, where it's just weirdly sized. I just think it makes it look a lot better. Now, a couple small details that I changed to sort of balance the design. I removed the ear for the most part, so it does not like this weird jutting out design. It sort of curves off and it looks a little bit better, in my opinion at least. And then, like I was talking about with the separated jaw in the good parts, I added these poles to sort of make it look a little bit more like the Rockstars / look like Withered Chica, with the pole design to sort of move the lower jaw up and down. I think it just makes it look a lot better. It looks like the jaw's actually connected to the head now, rather than being a whole weirdly separated section. It looks like it's connected, and it sort of ties in with other FNAF designs. So I think, in my opinion, it helps improve the design. But as you can tell, I really didn't change a whole lot. And the only things I did change was mostly with the head, which was really the worst part of the design on the original. So that's really about it for my design and for this video. I guess in conclusion, I think Scraptrap is a really great design and brings a lot of cool and unique elements to the FNAF series, despite the fact that he's not perfect, mostly with his head design. But I mean, I'm not gonna fault him on that, because I still think that the design is really cool, and I think people hate on him more than he deserves. I think it's mostly because it goes from Springtrap to him, and people don't see him as like a separate character. It's starting to come around now, but people didn't see him as a separate character back then. It was mostly just, oh, that's not Springtrap, that's a terrible looking design and we don't like him. And he wasn't really given the proper, I don't know, proper attention that he deserved. He was mostly just hated on. So I thought this video would be a fun way to sort of bridge the gap between people loving his design wholly and like just everything that's with it, and people who utterly hate his design. Because I'm sort of in the middle. I think it's a great design, but I think his head part is really the worst. So it's fun to sort of be in the middle and kind of give a different perspective on things. So that's about it for the video. I do want to talk about the series that I'm starting with FNAF Discussions. It's going to be happening every Saturday, so every day that I do my live streams, I'm going to make a video that I post before the live stream, just because I think it's sort of a fun way to break up solid gameplay, and it gives me a break from having to play constant games all the time. So it's a sort of a fun and unique series that I want to start doing for the channel. And another aspect with that is the thumbnail designs. Now, you might have noticed with some of my more recent thumbnails that they've had these checkered borders going around them. Now, my past 3 gaming videos have had this sort of red FNAF checkered pattern going around the outside, but this one has a green one. And the reason for that is because I think it would be fun to sort of color code thumbnails based on what they are. So my sort of gaming / like trailer or VHS reactions, so sort of the main bulk of the video content, are going to be the red bordered thumbnails, and then our sort of FNAF discussion / theory videos are going to be green. Our bonus content, so like when I finish a FNAF series and I sort of put together a bonus video, that's going to be yellow. And then our live streams, as you'll see later today, are going to have a blue thumbnail outline. So I just think it's sort of fun to sort of color code the different thumbnails and make it sort of easier to know which video you're finding. And I just think it's sort of something fun and more of a unique element to the channel. So you'll have to let me know what you think of that. But with that, that brings an end to this video. So I really hope you enjoyed our look into Scraptrap, what makes him good, what makes it bad, and just sort of a fun talk about his design. So be sure to leave a like, comment if you want to say anything, subscribe with notifications on to see more content like this. Be sure to check out our Shameless Plugs linked in the description, and I will catch you around in the next video. Goodbye.